on Zoom as well. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the second episode of Meet the Crew, where I talk to various members of the costume department. And we find out a bit about how they got into the industry and some of their advice and challenges that they faced climbing the ladder to get where they got. We've got, basically to give you some context about why I've started this series of webinars is to try and provide some education to people getting into the industry, whether or not they're young or old, but who want to access the industry and understand a bit about how to do so. So I started a boot camp in early 2019 where I would teach PAs how to use walkie-talkies, what to expect on set, so that they didn't come out onto their first day and be completely rabbit in the headlights and I don't know, ask inappropriate questions at the wrong times. Know what a 10-1 was, for instance. And anyway, so that seems to do quite well at kind of prepping PAs and runners for the industry. And then obviously here in lockdown, there's an opportunity to teach some people that, you know, specifically about the departments that they would want to get into by chatting about it. So here we are, and our panel comprises of, I'm being a bit wordy here, hopefully they'll be able to take over and start talking soon. So here we have Lauren Miller, who's a costume designer. She's recently finished Bulletproof season 2 or 3?
2 and 3.
Oh, right, there's a third. So you filmed all of 3 as well?
Yeah, it's specials in South Africa.
Ah, right, okay, cool. And is heading on to Top Boy, or am I allowed to say that? I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a bit up in the air. Okay, but anyway, so yeah, a great designer, up and coming, and working on some great shows that we'll hear about here today. Also, Joanna Eatwell, who has been in the industry for, not sure, 15, 20 years now or so as a designer, Joanna?
Bit longer.
Bit longer, okay. And worked on some great shows that you've no doubt seen, Wolf Hall and Taboo, and more recently Carnival Row. So yeah, looking forward to hearing from you, Joanna, about your experiences during that and the unique looks that you see in those shows, quite Victorian. Oh, look, I'm not going to guess what the hell they are. But and you've worked with Gayle Playford a number of times before, notably on Wolf Hall, was it?
Wolf Hall and Taboo.
And Taboo. And Gayle is a cutter for the costume makers, and you run manage the workroom as well.
Yeah. That's
excellent.
Right.
Well, maybe rather than I guess what it is that you do, why don't we go round from in that order, and you guys just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, and I'll stop guessing. Lauren, would you like to take it away for us?
Oh, I guess that makes me first. So yes, up and coming costume designer, currently working on a lot of TV. I kind of started working on a lot of short films and low budget feature films, and as time's gone on, kind of started working on TV series. My job, it tends to be a hell of a lot of shopping, a lot of designing things to be made by people in a lovely workroom or independent costume makers. It involves being a therapist. It involves fitting clothes onto people, a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, a lot of mood boards, and a lot of fun.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, yeah, so even as the designer, you're overseeing your whole department. So even if you have a supervisor and a workroom manager, you're kind of managing that team as well, are you? As well as designing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think how I run my team, I work very closely with my supervisor to kind of, manage the team. So it gives me a bit more freedom to be creative. But yeah, it's a lot of people management, things that you don't necessarily sign up for being a creative.
Sure, yeah, it's a very practical business, isn't it? Filmmaking. I think people think that maybe it's just about design and just the mood boards that you described. Huh?
Yeah, well, people do think it's a very glamorous job, but obviously it really is, and I love my job. It's what I've always wanted to do, but it does involve a lot of hours, a lot of brain power. It's hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one look at the art department in all their dungarees spilling out of a truck will tell you that there's quite a lot of nitty gritty going on to make the film. No offense to the art department, by the way, but and we love the fact that you get your nails dirty. But yeah, no, yeah. So okay, cool. Well, very good. Thanks, Lauren. Joanna, could you expand a bit on that? You're a designer as well.
Yes, I am, and as you delicately alluded to, I've been at it for quite a long time, very delicately. I did start in the early 80s, but I started in pop promos, and that was when there was a big explosion. MTV started, and promos were huge, and involved hundreds of dancers, big crowds, sort of deifying bands before they moved into the sort of more realistic, handheld camera. Let's just look at the band. So I started in music videos, and it was a time where you could, if you were lucky at the right time, you could jump straight in as a designer. You didn't have to work your way up in any way. You just had to say yes. If people asked you the impossible and could you do it by tomorrow, it was like, yeah, I could. So at that time I ran a workroom with a friend, and it was just about kind of, blue screen was just starting. So if you wanted 100 people, you didn't crowd replicate, you made 100 costumes for that. And did that
and put them on mannequins or something.
No, people.
Separate plates.
Everything was done for real. It's the time of the glass shots still existed then. In the 80s. We did everything for real. And I was very lucky. I worked with people like Diana Ross, Tina Turner, Rolling Stones. Everybody was making videos at that time. You just had to be able to not sleep for 3 or 4 days, because that was the time frame. If you worked on a promo and you didn't have 2 breakfasts, it was a kind of a weird one. Something had obviously gone wrong. You always knew you watched the sun come up and you were still filming. So I did that for as long as I could, and then moved into commercials. That wasn't really my thing. Wasn't enough creativity in that. It's too controlled. And then I moved across to drama, because it's storytelling, and there are stories that you get very excited to tell. And I think, I'm sure the others agree with me, but as costume people, we're visual storytellers. What we put on the screen informs the audience who, what, where, and when. We have to be quite clear in what we're saying. It's incredibly important. And that's fascinating when you get that right. It really is. We're very often the first contact with an actor, so it's quite a precious time. Our work is done very often pre-filming, so it's a bit of a magical time, I think.
Yeah, I bet. Do you find that you're sometimes quite privy to the building of the character with the actor? Is there quite a fluid?
Very much so. I think we're the sounding board. I really do, and I think that's why that first fitting is always so important, because if you get off on the same train of thought, you're pretty much going to get on forever. And you both want to tell. You hopefully both want to tell the same story, and you both want to build that character, and you both work hand in hand.
Yeah, I read in your the backstage article that you found it very important to focus on the cast, the class of the character, so that would inform kind of where the costume was going. I guess that's similarly with the actor, and then the accent that they're adopting, etc. So that feels like quite a similar process that they're going through as well.
I think class is important in period drama. Right. Because it defined who you were, what you wore, without getting too sort of, airy fairies. You were only allowed to wear certain things. Gayle will know about this as well. We've talked about this at length, sumptuary laws, and how your class dictated what fabrics you could wear, what furs you could wear, even what colours you can wear. We went into this a great deal in Wolf Hall. Right. These were actual laws that's, So that if you've got an illiterate populace, I need to walk up to you and I need to know immediately whether I need to defer to you or not. Now, you can't wear a badge that says, bank manager or whatever, but I need to know, oh, look, you're wearing blue and you're wearing silk, therefore I need to defer immediately to you're a baron or whatever.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's why, costume is full of information if you know how to read it. And I think that's, for me, is unraveling those patterns and understanding how you access that information from paintings or from wills, written information. It's fascinating. It's
definitely. It's all part of the tapestry of the frame that you're looking at as well, isn't it? The art department, the costume, the makeup, all of these elements, when in good harmony, really build that picture for the audience, that they're getting so many pieces of information subconsciously they don't even know.
We all have to be telling the same story, unless we're telling a disguise.
Sure, misdirection of some kind.
Sometimes you want to misdirect or use a disguise, but generally speaking, everything we put on screen from our department should enhance that story, should inform the audience. It's more than just pieces of clothing, it's pieces of information.
Excellent. Okay, I'm just trying to find. So Gayle, maybe you can introduce us a bit to us about your journey into the industry and why you chose to be a cutter, and
Yeah, can do. I am just thinking on what you were talking about there, Joanna. I remember some reviews of Taboo saying it was very much like a Hogarth etching.
Yes.
And that was a really lovely symbiosis of the art department and the costume department. Everything came together really beautifully on not a huge budget, actually.
No, it wasn't.
It looked absolutely fantastic, every scene. And I remember reading that and we talked about that.
Yeah.
And it felt really good to see that people could see everything coming together. Yeah, so I'm a little bit different in terms of my role in costume. I'm the principal cutter, head cutter, and I manage the workrooms. So usually I'll work in film and TV on something that's either a period drama or a fantasy, because that's where we will make everything mostly from scratch. Obviously for a crowd, we might be hiring things and then altering them to a particular concept that the designer would want. But in terms of my role, I think it's probably you might disagree, I think it's probably the most creative role out of everybody's, because we're constantly doing practical work, constantly trying things out. And also on one show, there might be maybe 1 or 2 designers and maybe 2 or 3 assistant designers. But in the workroom, in the making shops, there might be 20 people. You might have a men's department, you might have a ladies department, you'll have senior makers, you'll have junior makers and trainees. So it's usually quite a big department, depending on what the show is.
Well, these bigger shows, it sounds like what you're describing indeed is a factory of people all working towards, surely in an extra scene when you have 50 to 100 people, the work that must go into that for everybody to be on set in the right costume must be huge.
I mean, huge initially for the designers and the assistant designers, but when we're talking about crowd, quite often you might be hiring things in, you might be making from scratch. I might be making a pattern which will then send out to other people to make as well. Everything can't be made in-house, not 100% of everything, because it depends on what fabrics and things you're using and what environment you're in. I've been on shows where we've actually travelled. So there's a show I did with Joanna where we went to 87 different locations in 4 months. So therefore we're setting up a workroom at every single location. It was never dull, and I was very fit by the end of that. So yes,
locations all around the UK. Would you mind telling us which show this was? Or
I think that was Wolf Hall, wasn't it? It was the Southwest.
It was Wolf Hall. We never stayed anywhere more than 2 days, it felt like.
I know, you get bored after 2 days in one place, surely.
So none of Wolf Hall was really studios. It was all shot in castles and manor houses, and
there was no studio at all. It was all location work, all shot in the places that the events happened. That's very much the nature of that particular director. He wanted to, not just in costume but right across the board, from lighting to art department. He wanted to be as true to the period as possible. And of course we had Mark Rylance, who comes from a theatre background. He's the Globe again, where original practice is God. So we translated that onto screen.
Oh, that's great that you've got all of those people all on the same page about how that story should be told. It really obviously made a great impact in the final product because because everybody had that same idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go on. Sorry, Gayle.
Yeah, and then a slightly different version of that. I worked on a season of a program called Outlander, and in terms of the workroom, there was 65 of us working. So there's a separate men's department, separate ladies department, as well as separate crowd department. So there's sometimes you've got very individual departments who are all doing the same thing per se, but they're focusing on a different area, i.e. specialising in men's, specialising in ladies. So there's, in terms of making and running a making workshop, there's a lot of availability for roles and positions per show.
Yeah.
So it's very busy departments.
And how did you get into that department then? How did you find yourself? Was it just a work placement, skill set, or screen skills now? Or...
It's a really good question, I don't really know. It was that long ago, but I think I've always enjoyed creating something for somebody else. People always ask me this question: "Oh, do you make your own clothes?" And I always say, "Oh no, no, really no." I can put some nice things together, and I make sure I have a wash. But I mean, as to making, creating a look for self, it's much more about character for somebody else. It's not, maybe that's more of a fashion thing that people might want to create their own look. But in terms of costume, when I was about 8, I went to my dad's club, and he had a singer on stage, and I spoke to this lady, and she wore very beige clothes, and she was very quiet, and I spoke to her, and it didn't really know her. And then I was allowed to stay, and I saw her on stage, and this very quiet beige lady put on this amazing costume with really fantastic feathers and things like that. This was Shirley Bassey. And,
wow.
And her transformation was so visual, and you could tell that she felt that through the way she was dressed, and she was able to become this character. And that, I found that really inspiring and really interesting, and it has always been something in my mind that I really wanted to develop and do for other people. So it's always been something I've wanted to create, something for other people.
Nice.
But because I'm from a really small village, the only thing you could study was fashion initially. When I was 18, I could leave home, and I went to Liverpool. I did an amazing course, but it was 3 years pure period costume making. We studied that only, and I think that created a love in me for making something really beautiful on the outside that's really beautiful on the inside and really works. And in terms of the differences between screen and theatre, you still do that. You make costumes as beautifully as you can within the time limits and constraints that you have. But it's always been really important to me that it's beautifully done, and that is something that really excites me. So I just love making things for other people.
Excellent. Yeah, and interesting to hear that you could diverge. Would you say any of the panel would like to weigh in on this? Are there it sounds like there's kind of a design route where you would be thinking about the look before the making, or there's a making route where you're trying to exhibit the piece for the character. Is there any other aspects of costume that we're not discussing here then? Not a design route or a making route, but more particular skills that we're not bringing up at the moment that are worth some highlighting as well. It sounds like a vast department, basically, is what I'm hearing.
Department of many skills. I mean, it's a world. It has to be a world, and it has to, and that world needs to have, for all our creativity, it needs to have an element of organization, someone that actually steers that department and makes sure that we all come together and whatever beauty we're creating is ready for the day. And that's a supervisor. Excellent. And, it's a bit of an unsung position, but a department cannot exist without a supervisor. And I think people forget about that. We all want to come in through costume, but, a supervisor it's responsible for the budget, is responsible for hiring a fair amount of the crew, not so much the heads of each individual department within the department, if that makes sense, but their day-to-day running, just to make sure that it keeps this enormous, I don't know what would call us, whatever we are, moving forward on time, on budget, and in the right place.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah, supervisors are essential. And
Yeah.
then we have our standbys, who are people who actually like to be on the floor, which again isn't something that I don't think any of us would do within our job as costume designer or cutter. We rarely get to set, you know. I find I do, because you're working for tomorrow. The set is about today and the now, but we're always looking for tomorrow. You know, by the time it gets to today, it's out of our hands and it's done. We've got to look what's coming up, what's the next day. So again, we have the on-set part of the department who live in the now, and the rest of us living in the future.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much for helping us understand a little bit more about the structure of the department. I think sometimes people view filmmaking as a entirely design or creative process and forget about some of the people who run the practicalities or, you know, the functionality of our departments, the supervisors. I'm an AD, so yes, I would be, you know, remiss in not thanking and hailing the managers of our industry. Indeed, yeah, no, that's good to know. Lauren, you've done a bit of supervising as well. Would you like to say anything more about the I guess because you worked on some indies and short films, you probably naturally, as a designer, were almost expected to supervise, to take on a few more roles. Could you expand upon on that for us a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely one thing that I've learned as a designer, because of the route that I took to get to where I am now, is that when you are working on smaller projects, you do have less people in your team. You have to be a lot more hands-on, because you just don't have as many people to be able to do those things. Situation where, you know, I've had to make something for, you know, a project that I'm doing, and I've been up literally, you know, like Joanna was saying about when she was doing the music promos, you're kind of up for pretty much 4 days straight sewing. You get to set, you're sewing, you're trying to, you know, establish something, you've got to go out to the shops. Just you kind of learn to think on your feet and get creative, because you don't have the money to just go and buy, you know, this fabulous thing that you've seen, you've imagined. You kind of have to make it from scratch. You're like, okay, I've got this shirt, I've got this, let's do what I can do.
Could you give us an example of I don't know, a project you've worked on where, because a lot of the shows you're working on now are quite modern set pieces, instead of the period ones. Like, can you tell us a story about any of the costumes that you've made where you're like, that actually wasn't bought from TK Maxx or something, I created that?
Well, quite often, I mean, I was very lucky, because the first TV show, my kind of first big break, as it were, was a TV show called The Athena, which was 26 episodes for Sky Kids, and it was about a young girl who was a model and retrained as a fashion designer. So
Oh,
I
wow.
got to basically go back to fashion school and be this, you know, designer creating student fashion collections, and everything that this girl made, like my sketches were her sketches. And so that was just being in this world for like 8 months. It was the dream.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Your character must well have informed her character as well, no?
Yeah, totally. And they're kind of, you know, she was the lead, but there was like a really strong supporting cast of like another 8 students. So whenever they made things, like they'd have a project every week, and it would have to be something that's made. So although contemporary, it involved a hell of a lot of making and designing. And so, yeah, and within, you know, my current contemporary projects, it's always nice to kind of get, you know, things made where possible. Right. Obviously now with television, you don't necessarily have the time, and they do move so fast. You're kind of working in blocks, and it's episodic, and it's all very quick. And so when it is contemporary, you are a little bit more at the mercy of what's in the stores. But yeah, where possible, I do really like to design and create something that's unusual and something that you can't just buy on the high street.
No, sure. But I guess also with some of those shows, there's probably some product placement going on in order to put certain pieces in front of the camera. Is there not?
Occasionally, but I personally don't like it to.
Yeah, that's kind of wrestling control.
Yeah. On the odd occasion, you know, you will get a brand that wants to offer you bits and pieces for those shows, because when these things are aired on TV, for example, Bulletproof season 2, when that aired, I literally got messages on Instagram, got emails being like, where's this from? Where's that from? So people are interested and do want to know where bits and pieces are from. So it does make sense if you're a brand to kind of place it on TV, because people do pay attention to that. And I think more so than ever, people are really marrying like costume and fashion and really looking at what they're seeing on screen and wanting to replicate that themselves.
That's interesting you bring up fashion. Was there any point that any of you wanted to get into fashion, but then you found that maybe it wasn't the right world for you, that maybe film and TV was a better fit for you? Has anybody got any stories about that where there was a fork in the road and they decided to go in a different direction?
I actually started in fashion. I a degree in fashion and textile design. I then kind of worked for a couple of companies doing fashion PR and visual merchandising, and then I just felt like it wasn't the right fit for me, so kind of went freelance as a fashion stylist, because it's like I'd always loved films, and I was kind of, I think in my head I was like, I want to do fashion but for movies, but there isn't a job you can just walk into. There's no clear path. I didn't know anyone that worked in the film industry. So via the kind of fashion styling, being freelance, meeting various people, I trawled the internet for and found a short film that went for an interview, and they asked me to do the costume, and that kind of led to my journey in the costume world, which I'm so thankful for. But
how many years has that journey been now, from your first short film to where you are now?
Just over 7.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
It is pretty fast, but I think because I came into it with the mentality of like, I want to be a designer. So that's, I guess I was working on perfecting that craft instead of, I could have started as a trainee and worked my way up that way. But because I knew what I wanted to do, coming from a background, I had done commercials and music videos prior to my first short film.
Yeah,
so
right.
I had some kind of knowledge of actual set life as such. But yeah, so I worked a lot. I wouldn't say no to a job. I worked on tons of short films, and it kind of, my thinking was that you never know who you're going to meet. But sure. Yeah, the move from fashion was more that fashion is about thinking ahead and moving forward and what's on trend. But I just love a story. So I felt like film was so much more of a better fix. There's a character. One day you're getting things dirty or bloody, or it's from this period, or it's this whole new world that you can be literally anywhere in any timeline in any part of the world. So yeah, it
sounds
being a character.
Yeah, excellent. And indeed, that you say you wanted to be a designer, so you just started designing, much the same as Joanna. You said there was that opportunity in promos in the early 80s. I think that there are those moments in history where just technology has changed, or society is a certain way, and if that's the access point that you can get to get into the industry and do the job that you want to do, then you don't have to climb the ladder necessarily. You can just say, this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to be, and work your way through that.
Yeah, it works. It works for some people, but I think for some people there's a real benefit to starting as a trainee, to choosing your department, starting as a trainee, and as a trainee you may be buying one day, then maybe you'll help the breakdown, then maybe you'll go and do some hand sewing, maybe in the workroom. You might go and work in crowd. You get then that way, as a trainee, you'll get a real sense of what makes up that department.
Yeah.
And then you're not automatically just following one path. That's how people end up as breakdown artists, or there are people that enjoy working in the crowd, particularly on period films, because you have a certain amount of creativity. It becomes your department. You work to a brief, and you work so that your part fits with the rest of the show, but you have a certain amount of autonomy in your department. So some people like that, and that's where they want to be. Although again, once you get to head up the crowd, it's an organizational job more than a creative job. But there are so many different areas in costume that I think, there is a lot to be said for coming up through the department, if that's your way. It's horses for courses. It's different ways for different people, and
sure,
they're all very valid.
Yeah, and it's worth just getting a lay of the land as well, isn't it? Like, if you can get that trainee job and see where you might end up, then even if you wanted to go a different route, at least you have that information to make that decision.
Yes, you might want to end up on set as a standby. You know, there's so many different ways. And it's also about confidence. You see some people who really literally rush headlong into it. And, you know, only takes one or two negative incidences and you lose your confidence. And you see that happen to people as well. So again, you know, I would always advise people, you know, take it slowly, you know, learn, watch, observe, you know, say yes, you know, always say yes, you know, and if you don't know how to do it, then go off and find out. But, you know, always be positive and always, you know, just enjoy it. But, you know, take your time for some people, you know, don't run.
Yeah, we don't all have to be Orson Welles at 24 making Citizen Kane. Actually, as you see the fallout, kind of not the fallout of his career afterwards, but it had a big impact going that quickly to the top or whatever. And then, you know, if you are slow and steady, perhaps there's more to be gained in understanding your role better as you go along. I know I've wish at times that I had gone slower through the AD ladder than I did, because I'd already done another career beforehand. I came in at 28 and decided, no, I'm just going to be a first AD. There's enough digital projects out there that I can do, and it's in my wheelhouse of capabilities. But then, you know, looking back, I'm like, actually, it would have been really good to know more about the second AD role and more about you know, just some of the structures of the other departments that you like, you know, third ADs working with costume a lot, and you know, Gayle, sorry, go on.
We're a real winner if we've got a good third AD, haven't we?
Right.
It's very important.
Very. And a good second, you know, they liaise with us or with the supervisor particularly constantly. You know, if your second's not up to it, I think the show suffers incredibly.
Yeah, so those practical roles in the film industry are definitely worth kind of taking your time over and learning the craft in a calm manner, let's say.
Yeah, I definitely say so. Like, I've been lucky because along my journey as a designer, I have managed to do like other roles. Like, I've done, you know, a few standby roles and supervising roles as well. So it really, I feel like it adds to being a better designer, because I've done the standby role, so I kind of know what my standby is encountering on set, I guess. So I feel like for me on the shows that I do, it really helps that I have that knowledge.
Sure, it helps your communication, surely, with what you need from a character or a scene from your department.
Yeah.
They're not all steps, you know, they can be the end point. You know, we have career standbys who are very, very good at what they do. You know, and if you're lucky enough to get a career standby on your show, you've got a direct link to the director. That, you know, they're your eyes and ears, and you know that they're going to support you. They're not going to be too afraid to talk up, you know. And traditionally, a lot of the times, standbys are very young, and I think it's quite a vulnerable position, you know. So I think, again,
line of your department.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for having an older career standby.
Yeah, excellent. I guess, Gayle, this is kind of we're talking a bit about the practical roles in the department. Would you add anything to where you should be looking to get into sorry, what's my question? Would you expand upon this at all? Like, you know, how would you see, because you're a career cutter, so how did you decide, okay, that's where I want to be? How did you fixate on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's slightly different to a designer in terms of the fact that, well, so you were saying earlier about, is it between fashion, is it between costume? For me, it was kind of like between theatre and screen. They're quite different, but I started out, but also there's a lot of transferable skills, and there's like a symbiosis between the way you work as well. And my background in theatre was quite extensive before I moved into screen. And I think I learned a lot of the trade there, really, starting out as a wardrobe assistant, which was 27, 28 years ago, and it's kind of like a trainee role in screen, because you will do everything. You'll do the hiring, you'll do the stock that you'll do all alterations, you'll do buying, you have to organise everything, and it's such a good way to understand how a production works. But in theatre, it's very different, because you know that you've got 4 or 6 weeks. You have a set of designs with samples on, and the director won't probably change that. So
Right.
it means the designer has had the time and the ability and the knowledge in the casting beforehand, and then you know how long you've got, and therefore you can organise it. In film, it's a little bit different, because quite often there will be script changes that have massive impacts on costume and massive impacts on everyone's like that. Yeah. And massive impact on the order in which we film everything, and we all know that. But when you first start in the industry, you might not realise that really happens. It really does. And it's really good to be a people person, because the workroom has to liaise not only with the design department and the crowd department, but also the breakdown and dyeing department, because very often we're making things out of a fabric that's bought in that may need to go to the breakdown and dyeing department before you can use the fabric. And then you need to make sure it gets back to the breakdown department to be broken down into whatever level of breakdown it's needed for that particular scene. And because scripts and things are moving around quite often, it is a big organisational job, really, to keep
on these bigger shows. They're changing the script last minute, and you're having to run with new costume changes that right down to the level of how the costume is even made. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very often. And it's really important to, if you're running a workroom or working in any of the costume departments, to try and keep calm about those changes.
Right, sure.
Make sure you get it done.
But I think, again, that's half our job is about having a plan B. That's when people say, what is your experience? It's being able to cope with whatever happens, whatever actor falls over, breaks their leg, gets recast as someone completely different to be on screen tomorrow, or when your truck burns down with all your costumes in, and you've got a ball scene coming up in 2 days and it's period. You have to have a way of coping, and that's what I always say that they're paying for. They're paying because we can get them out of trouble. We can always cope with whatever challenges come up, and it's not just you. There are other departments facing the same challenges, but you just have to focus in and work out and make a plan and find a way through.
It's a lot of problem solving in filmmaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're there shooting a scene that everybody thinks that they understand how it's going to play out, but actually, the world of force majeure is always going to have some kind of impact on what you're doing that day, and you all have to be able to think on your feet and not lose your shit, I suppose, in doing so. So you came from theatre as well, didn't you, Joanna? And how did you find that helped, like that longer process in designing the costumes helped inform your designing later on in film, or?
No, I did. Well, I trained in theatre. I went to Wimbledon for 4 years and did theatre design, and where it taught you that the main premise of that course at that time was to teach you to have ideas. And not to be afraid to have ideas. It wasn't particularly practical, although we learned how to paint scenery, make props, small amount of working, learned to make corsets. But, they gave us a very basic training in lots of areas, including having to perform, which was kind of weird at the time. But it was about understanding the space and how a space works. So if you're a designer, you need to understand that. But when I came out, when I graduated, I didn't work in theatre. I mean, over my career, I've done a few theatre pieces, but there's something for me where I need to work fast. I quite live on adrenaline. I like the speed of filmmaking. I'm not very good if there's too much time. Although as I've got older, I appreciate it more. I appreciate it in the terms of research, but I actually like the speed at which we work in film and television.
It must be a bit weird now in this time of coronavirus. I've certainly found it weird not having something to do at every minute of the day and waking up at 5 o'clock, or in costumes example, probably 3 o'clock. So how have you filled that time, everyone? Maybe Lauren, you can tell us what have you been doing to fill the void of working constantly and that speed?
what have I been doing? Redecorating, riding my horse, knitting, just making some patterns, decided to make some clothes.
Oh, excellent. So you've actually kind of gone back to fashion a little bit in this period.
Yeah, I've got lots of fabric. I've been clearing out my loft. I've got tons of fabric. I'm just like, I'm going to make some things out of them.
Interesting. Joanna, have you found yourself developing a new skill in all of this, or?
Not necessarily. No, not really. I probably could have, but I didn't. I do find it difficult not doing anything. So I tend to, I don't know, I seem to race around, but I'm not sure I achieve very much. But what I have done is gone back and watched a lot of films. Films that I've always wished I'd watched, you know, a lot of period films. You know, I've been watching a lot of early 60s films. Absolutely, it's a wonderful time period in filmmaking. So, you know, it's given me a chance to have a real sort of a relish of films. So I've enjoyed that. I've been looking at books. I don't think I've read a whole sentence. I seem not to have the concentration for that at the moment. I keep trying. But,
I know what you mean, yeah. I feel like this. Yeah, the space that you have now to do anything is too much. There's too many options. You want to go and do something else once you've started something.
We're used to structure.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We really are used to structure and deadlines, and suddenly taking it away. And saying to Lauren earlier, it's a fabulous dream, you know, being told to stay at home and not feel guilty about not working because there isn't any work. But after a while, you do feel a little bit like you're floating around. So I don't know. It's a new experience, and it's an odd experience, and I have enjoyed it. But God, I'd quite like to be somewhere else. You know, I've got a real urge to travel.
Yeah, I think it's enough now, right? 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I want a new city. I want a new job with new challenges. You know, that's again part of the joy of our job is you turn up in a new country, a new city, and you have to make it your own within 5 minutes of getting off the plane and work with a whole new group of people. That's the kind of thing I think I'm missing, that adrenaline rush. You know, okay, I can walk down the road and see the same people, but you know, it's enough is enough.
Yeah, where's the variety, the spice of life? We got into this industry to travel and to
adventure.
To adventure.
We like adventure. We like the unknown. We're you know, as a freelancer, you're pre-programmed not to know what's coming next, but you know that something's coming, and so this kind of endless knot is really quite hard to deal with.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. Like, at least there's a horizon to your in-between job status. You're like, okay, well, I know that there's something coming.
Absolutely. And I've got this much time to fill, and I'll do it really madly, and I'll go to the theatre, and I'll go to the cinema, and I'll go to an exhibition, and I'll walk through London, and I'll love it. But actually taking all that away, and work, and kind of human contact with friends, it's been an odd experience.
Yeah. Gayle, how have you found it? Have you been secretly cutting in the basement while your family are upstairs, just to get a taste back of the industry?
Well, I think my family are quite ready for me to go away to work again now. I'm never really here. My children are quite small, and they're like, yeah, it's great having mummy here. And they're like that. So when are you going away again? We just see you on the weekends, so you can tell me what you've been doing. And I think they're quite used to me being away, because you are very often away, which I love as well. And that adrenaline rush has not been there. However, because I've made a lot of scrubs for helping dress medics. So we've been doing a lot of that kind of work. And we're now making quite a few face masks to give out to food banks and things like that. So using the practical skills that you can, but basically trying to organise my workroom and studios. You know, all these bags of fabrics you have in the loft, all the bags of fabric you've got under the table. I've been going through all those and thinking, yeah, that'd make a great, will I ever do that? And hopefully trying to reorganise that stuff at home that is useful.
And because of all of these bits of fabric around, are you storing those away because they're just cut-offs from a job? Or are you thinking, I really have a passion project in mind, which I would like to, I would like to tell this story. Is anybody doing it for that reason? Or why do you amass all this fabric?
Doesn't everybody who works in costume, I think?
Yeah.
It looks good.
Yeah. I think also, I think it was going back to something Lauren said earlier, is that you take on different jobs of different scale. We all do. We take it on because we want to tell that story. It can be a big picture, or it can be a small film. and so sometimes I think there's something in all of us that squirrels away little bits and pieces for when we do that one project where you think, I've got no money, but I'd really like to. You think, oh no, I've got this, I've got that. So I think in the back of our mind, I think that's partly why we keep a lot of stuff.
Interesting, yeah. Kind of like I know gaffers and lighting people, they seem to amass all sorts of gels all over the house. For what purpose surely is all of this gels, apart from to gel your own lights, I suppose?
Yeah, I keep bits of vintage embroidery and lace and trims and buttons that then we add to costumes. You know, you've got no guarantee of finding them when you need them.
You've broken a dream that I had last night, Joanna. Weirdly, I dreamt of you last night. You were in Carnival Row playing against Cara Delevingne. Yeah, like I think it's because your photo that you gave us for the webinar has this this choker kind of on that maybe the actress Indira is wearing as well in Carnival.
No, I think Alice Krieg might be wearing it.
Ah, right. It just tripped something in my head or whatever, and then I dreamt of a scene with you in it. So because your look in that photo it seems like there's some parallel going on with some of the work that you've made as well. Are you kind of chosen for that Victorian like steampunk kind of look, or this question has come out of a dream? Sorry, I don't know if it's
I don't know. I mean, I do get a lot of things. I get, obviously there are period filled pieces, but quite often it's if they don't want a straight from book to period piece that I'll get asked, which was Taboo and Carnival Row. Having said that, I've just done Venom for Marvel, so you know there is no pattern.
Right, yeah, it's serving the story, serving the job that excellent. I should also mention, as we're coming up to the end of the hour, that if anybody watching has any questions for our panelists, if you could write those on Zoom or on Facebook. My producer is in the other room, /wife is in the other room, watching Facebook as well. So if you have any questions, please do ask. I have some questions. Oh yeah, on Carnival Row as well. Are those wings on all the actors on the Fae or whatever? Are those would that be costume or is that all digital?
No, not digital. The premise with Carnival Row was to do as much for real as possible. So there's very little digital there, but they came out of the makeup effects team, which was a whole other department to us.
Oh, really? So those weren't part of costume in the end?
No, I mean, costumes had to be adapted because obviously you had to have a way for the wings to come out from the skin to the costumes. I think perhaps when they're flying, then of course they're a digital effect, but when they're in repose and hanging, then they're real. They cast them in latex.
Ah, interesting.
They must have been latex.
So even where you would think sometimes it's a costume, actually there's another department and another job that actually makes
yes, we crossed over with makeup effects quite a bit on that because there were horns as well. Although hooves were us for some reason, hoof boots were us.
That decision is a discussion in pre-production sometimes, isn't it? Where you're like, who's actually going to take this on? I know as a good example is blackouts in a night scene for a set. Is it art department or the electrics department? Who's going to take responsibility of blackouts on this particular project?
Comes down to budget, doesn't it? Usually, whose budget can sustain that?
Excellent. So I guess Lauren, what would you say was the biggest challenge getting to where you are today? What would you give as a piece of advice to any up and coming designers?
I would say my biggest challenge was I guess it was really finding a way in, I think. So yeah, like I said, I trawled the internet just to find something that I could possibly do that was a way into costume. And
were they free? You just did it for the love of it and then hoped that it would become a job?
Completely free.
Right.
No money whatsoever. It was a passion project. It was a beautiful little film and I loved every minute of it. So, you know, as much as I would say not to work for free, I think that's how I found my way in. And then you end up meeting people that are already in the industry, you know, all young, passionate people, and I just got recommended job after job after job. So
yeah, brilliant. There's a bit of a paradox there with our advice to tell people not to do things for free, because otherwise you're not doing it for the love of it. And this is kind of what we all got into it for, was because we love film and we love what we do. And if you didn't do something for the passion of it, then how are you going to discover that? So I think that it's good advice to find short films or even features that you're doing with your friends and just start honing your craft.
Yeah, I think if no one's getting paid and you're all doing it for passion, I think you get some really great work, and people work really hard even though they're not being paid, because they're there for the love of it. So I think they're great jobs to actually get a really good start in, and you meet some really good people. So
no, indeed, yeah, and it's important parity, I think. So if you're not if someone's working for free, then everybody should be working for free.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, excellent. I've got a question here from Abigail. It's we did talk about standbys quite a lot, and I wanted to interject at some point and just say, what is a standby? But that's exactly what this question has come to us as. So can you just elaborate? I don't know who wants to take this one, but what is a standby, and how do they do their job on set?
Well, I'd probably say.
Thanks a lot.
Well, because I've done it before. So as a standby, it's your job to basically look after the costume and put it on your actor and make sure it looks as perfect as the designer wants it to on set. So, you know, quite often you could be on a job where the designer will come and establish, it could be like a bow, a beautifully tied bow, and, you know, a corset or whatever, but you just have to make sure it looks correct for everything that it has to go through in its lifespan of a film or TV series. Make sure the actor has everything on that they need to, and make sure, you know, in terms of continuity, that it looks right, you know, because we obviously film things out of order. So you don't want it that someone's got a coat on in one scene and the next scene they should have their coat on, but they haven't. That's kind of the responsibility of the standby, to make sure that all looks as it should.
It's well said. It's actually responsibility of many departments to be on top of continuity, and not just the script supervisor. They're the last buck. The buck stops with them or whatever, but it's everybody's responsibility.
But there's an overall picture, whereas I think costume standbys, it's just making sure that everything is as it should be.
Yeah, and understanding the story that they're telling with that costume and that character. And making sure that they know when to deteriorate the costume, and when to, that the costume has to tell a story. It's not a static piece. It moves through the story with the actor. And I think it's really important that as a standby, that you understand what the story is that you're telling.
Yeah.
I'm constantly confused by people who haven't read the script but have been working on a project for weeks, and you're like, you don't know what's going on in the scene. How is that possible? You should be reading all the new pages that are coming out, no matter what your role is on the film.
And also, a standby has to really think on their feet in really quick time, because sometimes there might be some maintenance that needs to be done to a costume while they're on set. So you need to have your on-set kit with you, which is, various threads and tapes and things like that. But you might have to go in between a shot and fix something. And you're kind of like really under pressure then as well. So you have to be quite pragmatic as well. As
a rain machine, or the sea or a river. There could be any number of hazards that they've got to deal with. Preserving a costume, preserving the actor, whatever. You've got to be quite tough to be a standby.
Yeah.
You're the front line. You have to relay conversations. You're kind of like a Boy Scout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's a really good answer from everybody there. I think that, Abigail's now saying thank you very much. I think she understood well there. I've got another question here. It's quite long, so I'm just going to read it out. I'm a recent, this is from Sarah. I'm a recent BA Honours Costume Construction graduate, and my last module was very heavy on historical accuracy. Working in period drama is where I would like to be as a maker, but also as a dresser. What should my next steps be? Gayle and Joanna, thank you for your work on Wolf Hall, one of my favorite programs. Costumes were stunning. So yeah, what would the next step be after university for someone who wanted to get into being a dresser?
I mean, if she wanted to be a dresser in terms of theatre and West End shows, that's a different thing. But in terms of screen, if you could apply for workroom traineeships, and I think the skill set still take on trainees, and they put them on all.
It's now called Screen Skills, I think, isn't it?
Called Screen Skills. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and the traineeships that you can get in the workroom would be really good if you've done construction and you can make things. But also, I think a traineeship in the crowd department is really beneficial to understand the different workings of how a show goes together. Something you were mentioning before, Joanna, because then you will get to do some alterations, you will get to add embellishments, you will get to do some making, but you'll also understand how a show goes together in quick time, and that adrenaline rush that we were talking about, which will be a new skill that you can't really learn at uni. It's until you get into it you can start to understand that. So applying for a traineeship would be the first thing that you would probably do.
There's a lot of demand for those traineeships. I know they can be difficult to get into, but I would highly recommend Screen Skills and trying to get into a traineeship. They seem to place people in the industry, and more often than not, that is then their lifeline that helps them climb up through the industry and gives them a long career with money. If you come in at the top, you can end up kind of struggling and keeping it as a second job. So do have a look at those traineeships if you're coming out of university. Yeah, I've got a couple more questions here as well. Wait a minute here. So what advice would you give to a costume graduate? This is from an anonymous contact, trying to break into the industry whilst the industry is in this current status during lockdown. Anybody want to take that?
Don't be put off, because I don't think you're going to get a positive answer from anyone just yet.
Yeah.
I really don't be put off. Don't get depressed. Don't give up. This is extraordinary times. I don't think anybody, obviously we know there are a couple of big films finishing up, but on the whole, most of us are still just waiting for that real confirmation. So just, don't give up is what I'd say.
Yeah, it takes some tenacity, doesn't it? More so than ever before to continue in the creative arts at the moment.
Yeah,
I think now's a really good time because, for example, like this scenario, a lot more people are free. So people are more free to answer emails, and if you have any questions or advice, and a lot more people are doing mentoring. So I think it's a good time to take advantage, learn a new skill that could help you towards your costume career.
Yeah, and also contacting supervisors are usually the port of call for employing new people and introducing new people into a lot of the different departments. So if you can get a supervisor's contact who might be resting or might have just ended a big job, then that's a good way if you're not wanting to go through Screen Skills.
Yeah,
absolutely. Contact those the people who run the departments, the managers of those departments, the supervisors. I was contacted a couple of weeks ago by someone who'd seen I'd worked in Bristol and Bath on a show, and they just cold emailed me, love to be on one of your teams at some point. Of course, I wrote straight back and said, that's great that you've taken your initiative to look for the work as well. Don't be afraid of contacting the right people for the role. Maybe the DOP might not give you a correct camera traineeship, but the second AC might be looking for someone. That's not the right example for your department, but still, exactly. It's important. Got a couple more questions here. How much time do you folks have? Do you mind answering a couple more questions?
No.
Okay, cool. A couple of them are just thank yous. Okay, wait a sec. Any advice also from uni? Yeah, we've kind of touched on that as well. What are the most important skills and personal qualities from Celeste that you would like to see in a wardrobe technician? What kind of attitude, I suppose?
Someone who is calm, someone who listens, someone who's polite, doesn't push, someone who's brave, quietly brave, says yes, works things out, does their research, asks the right questions, just someone who wants to be there and wants to relish every minute that they're there. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
If you've got a passion for it and that's the position you want to be in, you will show that to people, won't you? That you know, it's a friendly industry ultimately. If you're there for the right reasons, then you will be embraced.
Yeah, and to take, I don't want to use the word criticism, but I'm thinking, you know, you're there learning, you know, that you're inevitably not going to get everything right. And if somebody does correct you, take that in good faith, you know, take that and learn. And remember that people are working under pressure. So, you know, they're not there necessarily to teach you you know, at every step of the way. You've got to use initiative. But, you know, it's such a wonderful department to work in. And if it's what you want to do, then just don't give up. Just keep trying. It is a magical department to be in. It really is.
Well, you certainly create magic, guys. Like some of the shows I've been watching to look at for your CVs over the past week have transported me all over the place. A lot of great fantasy and brutality and reality and great stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think that's we've touched on many topics there, and I think we've kind of answered all of the questions. So thank you, guys. I wanted to end every session with a recipe that you would kind of impart for anybody making their own small projects or whatever that they would have to cook for their own crews. But I think I'll just ask you to just send me those on the side, and then at some point I'll maybe put together a production cookbook of some kind. And we can have Gayle's Tom Yum soup or something like that, or I don't know.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so watch the space. That's definitely an idea that's not really fully formed yet. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. Just a bit of admin. We've got another webinar next week with Matt Whitecross, the director, who has made recently Coldplay's Head Full of Dreams. And he worked on, he made as well Supersonic, the Oasis documentary, and Spike Island, and Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, which Joanna was the costume designer on now 10 years ago. And I was a lowly office PA, but well, maybe not so lowly. I was probably very loud.
Lovely film. Yeah, lovely project.
It was a nice project. And his editor as well, he's worked on the Coldplay film with, and a number of other projects. I think the Bauhaus 100 film that's on a BBC soon, and On the Road and The Wedding Guest from Michael Winterbottom. So that should be an interesting discussion as well, finding out a bit about how directing and editing works and how to get into those games. So yeah, thank you everyone. And we'll probably faff around trying to end the call here for a little bit, but here ends the costume department. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. Best of luck going forward as well, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.